I'd like to now call my friend, our resident health psychologist, Jennifer Skues, into the show. Good morning to you, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
I must say that I am quite intrigued about the gender differences. Last week we had such an interesting conversation about masculine or typical masculine/feminine traits,
Right.
and how they affect relationships and how we can be aware of them, so that we can avoid the two pitfalls of either being overly sensitive or undersensitive. And today you promised that we would be talking about gender differences and the impact in relationships. So where do we start?
Well, we're going to start with the brain and how men and women function, because we have different capacities and even the structure of the brain differs. So this means that men and women have differences that definitely impact their perception of each other and how they interact.
So are we talking about actual physiological differences, or is it a man's brain different from a female's brain?
Yes, it is.
Or are they exactly the same?
Well, a brain is a brain, but the way they interact and operate differs.
Okay.
And this is where women, they actually have a bigger memory center than men do.
That explains a lot of things.
Doesn't it?
That is explaining a lot, because my wife always reminds me of all the details of every story that ever happens to us. And I just remember the big picture and barely so.
Yes.
I'm good to remember Bible passages, though. That's my only thing that I can remember. Yes, it's got its
advantages, but for women it's got its disadvantages because they have a very busy brain. But this is where we've got that left and right brain structure, and this is where it's like having connections between left and right for information to pass back and forth. And we have looked at this where the left brain is more your thinking, processing, rational brain, whereas the right brain links into your emotional memory bank. Now, women have multiple connections between left and right. So that means their busy brains are going from information to emotional memory bank and back and forth. And they have a very busy brain. Men have a major connection between left-right brain, and it's more about problem solving, whereas women are more emotionally focused. Women also have a bigger range of emotions than men do. And this is where we have a lot of problems, because the male brain is for problem solving. It's very good at looking something and actually screening out things around them. So they can be very, very focused, highly focused, to the point that nothing else exists. And if you watch a lot of men in the TV, they get the remote and they're scrolling through channels, and you talk to them and they don't hear you. Or they say, "What did you say?" So this is where we have these differences, whereas women assume and men assume our brains are the same, which is not true. So you have to take into account that women have a much busier brain, are more emotionally focused, we're more problem focused, and often have blinkers on, so they can really focus on that problem. Now, there's advantages in both, and depending on what we talked about last week of how masculine and feminine range the brain is to how well it works, because that single-mindedness and focus is very much more on the masculine side, whereas the busy brain and emotional focus is very much more on the left side of the right side of the brain. So this is where we get those differences, and some women can think more like that male and focus, whereas some men can be a bit more on that feminine side, so their brain might be a bit busier. Okay. So it's sort of not cut and dried. Yes. And we're talking generally, we're not saying everyone is the same. You know, we differ in our personality and how we use that brain function.
I understand. So, okay, so talk us through a little bit about some practicalities here. Let's say for the men out there, knowing that their brains is more tends to be more problem solving focused versus let's say their partner's brain, which is more on emotionally focused.
Yes, focused.
What are things that?
What are the problems?
What are the problems? What can go wrong?
Yeah, there are problems because women assume men have the same range of emotions and can think like a woman or should. And it's like, you should understand or you should know how I feel, right? Whereas men struggle to understand women. Like women can go out with a group of their friends and they talk over each other. They will take it in and their busy brain takes things in, but they feel better at the end of it. Whereas a man can't do that. I've had a few men say, I can't cope if I go out and there's all these women and they're talking, because their brain has to be focused, you see. So that creates differences. So, and women, interestingly with this, women need to talk a lot more, and they just need to talk, maybe be listened to. They don't need the problem solved. Where often in relationships, a man tries to solve the problem and the woman says, you're not listening, right? So one of the tips I give couples is that, particularly like in relationships, for the man to maybe ask, you want me just to listen or would you like me to help you solve the problem?
Wow, that's great. That's great advice.
Yeah.
I better start practicing that one.
Yes, and it's women have to then respect the fact that the male brain is focused, and there's that primacy recency factor. So there's you can give 3 instructions. Now, for the male brain needs 1 instruction at a time, usually. I'm not saying they all don't, depends on that femininity, masculine factor. But that means that the man has to really focus on that first thing. And if you give them several things, they're busy taking in 2 and 3 or information, and then they find that they don't remember number 1. So it's better to focus on one thing at a time. So in conversations, if women can stay focused and not give 10 different things to the male, it will work a lot better, and just go from one to the next to the next.
Wow, absolutely. Okay, so let me recap that. So one practical tip that you're giving here, particularly for men, when the woman wants to say something, you can ask, hey, okay, would you like me to just to be a good listener, to listen, or would you like me to help with some advice?
Yes. Would you like my advice? I say, no, I just want you to listen to me.
Yes. Okay. And then on the other hand, when women are feeling, let's say, overwhelmed and they wanted to dump a number of situations that are concerning for them to their apartments, instead of doing like the 10 things that are wrong, let's just type just like one thing. You know, Lawson, you have not closed the cap of the toothpaste for the 10th time this week, kind of a thing. Instead of going through, all of the undies around the house and
and you didn't do this, and you didn't do that.
That's right. And using the boots full of mud and walking into the house with them. And okay, all right. So that is great. So what do you reckon, Lawson? Do you think that these tips are going to be helpful for your marriage? You're just starting out. Mm-hmm. Did you know about these tips before?
Yeah, I think when we were doing like premarital counseling, like those things were suggested, but even when we were dating, like we could definitely see our differences. And I think that for my wife Shanna and myself, like we're just different people. We have different ways of operating and doing things, and different ways of different things that stir us up and different things that calm us down and whatnot. I think some of them are similar, and that's why we're compatible. But yeah, I think that's just men and women. It's just there's different things going on. Yeah, men to women to person, like different stuff going on. So. Yeah. Yes,
but it's respecting those differences and realising they are actually, with the brain, it can be physiological.
Yeah.
It's not that person is being difficult, it's the way the brain operates.
Yes. So interesting.
It's not personal.
That is very interesting. And I think that should give us all more, patience and understanding towards one another, saying, hey, look, each of our brains are wired differently, so we need to learn how to work within this framework of differences. So, Jennifer, are there any other differences that you believe we should be aware of so we can, live more harmonious relationships?
Another difference that I find interesting that is helpful is that women are more sensitive to touch. And there's a chemical under the skin that is stimulated that relaxes with touch. Men generally have less of that chemical, so touch isn't as important to them. But it's not that they don't like touch necessarily, but women love the touch factor. Now, I'm talking generally now, most women and most men. So for a woman, this is where in a relationship, with touch being important, if the man understands that, he can make sure he provides it. Because it's not about whether you want it or not. This is where we look to the other person in our relationship and how can I understand and grow the relationship. And touch is very powerful. So women are more likely to go for a massage, particularly, relaxation massage and that sort of thing, probably than a man is.
That makes sense.
Yes.
So at what times? Because I'm thinking here, if if the wife is stressed out, and is that the right time to offer the massage, or is maybe better just to listen first, because sometimes they may be not in I don't want to be touched mode, right?
Right. Now, touch is so powerful. There was a study done years ago in a library where they had people who came to return their card to the librarian, and it was, I don't know how, there was some sort of random factor where some people, as she took the card, she'd lightly touch the hand, whereas others she wouldn't. She'd just take the card. And they found that the person who had the light hand touch stopped and communicated more than the person who they didn't touch.
Oh.
So touch actually stimulates connection. And unless the other partner's saying, do not touch me, and if there's a lot of maybe trauma history, particularly for women, that might happen. But generally, if they're a bit wound up, just touch them lightly on the hand, the arm, the shoulder, and help them to calm down. Or ask, would you like me to give you a hug? Or, and we're looking at intimate relationships here, or even with friends. Sometimes offer a hug. It's not something you just assume, particularly if you don't know the person. But this is where the touch is very, very powerful. And therefore men can use it to help the woman, and the woman has to respect. Just because she loves to be touched doesn't mean he responds in the same way.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, that is so interesting. Jennifer, we are running out of our allocated time for today. I cannot wait until our next conversation as we are exploring these highly practical tips on relationships. What is a takeaway message? What do you believe? What should we try to and practice this week from today's conversation?
Well, I think for men, respecting that women have a busy brain and not to be daunted by it, and for women to realise men's brain isn't as busy as, and not to overload. So I think that's a good one, just to be aware of it, maybe do some observation during the week of how men and women interact or how you relate to people, and observe our behaviours in that sense.
Very good. To use the technological terms, I think that women's brains are more similar to a multi-core processor, where men's are single-core computers.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.